Back in the saddle, fresh off the bench, the Matt Bernier Show. DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle, at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. This is the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show. We're going to take a look ahead to the Breeders' Cup, which is only about 2 weeks away. We'll look at some of the more likely and shorter favorites for the 2 days of the Breeders' Cup here in 2018 down at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll also give you the Week 7 NFL trifecta, off to a 13-5-0 start, clipping off at 72%. Hopefully, we can keep that thing rolling along. You listen to this podcast like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. If you're over on YouTube, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. Always greatly appreciated. You get all the latest offerings from DRF TV. Please do the same over on iTunes. Write us a review. Give us a positive rating. However you digest this thing, thank you for doing so. Been gone for a little bit of time here. A couple weeks out on the road with the NBC stuff. Last week out on vacation. Now we're back, though. We're ready to go. We're going to dive into some of the more likely favorites anyway. And when I say more likely favorites, I strictly mean from a betting standpoint, not necessarily that I think they are the most likely win contenders or anything of that nature. I'm more so just specifically focused on who are some of the shorter prices likely to be for Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday. Maybe we'll kind of compare that to some of the odds that are out there right now over in Europe, and also perhaps give you some positives and negatives, some pros and cons about each one of these horses in these respective races. There's only a handful of them that I'll go over, and I'm not going to include probably one of the more interesting divisions as far as favoritism is concerned, the distaff, simply because with Abel Tasman and Monomoy Girl, that in and of itself, that could go on for quite a long time. So I'm not going over that one in particular because they are the two horses that'll take the lion's share of the money. The rest of these divisions, I'm focused on one horse in particular, and again, we'll give you a little bit of a positive and negative reason to think that they have big chances come Breeders' Cup weekend in 2 weeks. Let's start off with the, I believe it's being billed Future Stars Friday. The juvenile races will be run on Friday of Breeders' Cup weekend, and all the other races will be run on Saturday. So we'll kick things off with, in my opinion, very clearly, and I believe Andy Serling posted a poll, maybe last week or the week before, asking a question about who the public thought would be the most likely winner on Breeders' Cup weekend. I believe it was something along those lines. I happen to fall into the camp of this filly right here. She's going to run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf. She is trained by Chad Brown. She is a very, very talented 2-year-old on the grass. Her name is Newspaper of Record. We're going to go back to the stretch run of her most recent start, her second lifetime start. This is the Miss Grillo. This is Larry Colmus with the call of a fantastic performance.
Coming to the top of the stretch, Newspaper of Record turns for home in control. The main threat on the outside, Miss Technicality, who's trying to close the gap. And they're followed by Dog Tag in third. But now Newspaper of Record is set down in the final furlong, and she takes off. Oh, she's pouring it on late. This is one fine filly. Newspaper of Record. She won it by 8.
Now, I think if she shows up with that effort, not to be rude to any of the Europeans coming over here or any of the other domestic hopes, I just simply don't think anybody is good enough to run with her. She earned, if I pull up the PPs right here, she earned an 88 Beyer speed figure that day. This is on the heels of a debut score at Saratoga where she earned a 78. She's won both of her races by 6 3/4 and 6 1/2 lengths. If you're looking for some sort of a negative, I suppose you could throw out the possibility that, keeping in mind that those two races were both run on yielding turf, and there's a scenario where she gets firm going for Breeders' Cup Friday, but there's also a pretty darn good scenario where she gets less than firm going. But who's to say that firm doesn't actually help her cause? Maybe she's just that much better than everyone else, and she's winning in spite of the fact that maybe she doesn't act as well on yielding or softer going as opposed to firm going. I don't know. None of us truly know that at this point. What I do know is she has immense ability. I mean, anyone that has watched a horse race more than once can tell when there is a horse that looks like there's maybe a little hint of something special going on there. And this filly, I just hope everything continues on this path, because what we've seen through 2 lifetime starts, I said it, I believe I had her in a horse watch, or I had mentioned her at least when I discussed the 2-year-olds coming out of the 2 meetings over the summer, Saratoga and Del Mar, I brought up, I said, you don't ever want to throw too much expectation at a horse or an individual in any kind of sport. You don't want to compare the next basketball player to LeBron. You don't want to compare, the next, I'm making it up, the next hockey player to Gretzky, or today would be closer like Crosby or Ovechkin, or some of the other kids that are out there now. But you look at her and you can't help but draw that parallel to Chad Brown. He had another unbelievable 2-year-old filly a few years back. She went out to California. She dusted a field in the Juvenile Fillies turf, and she went on to win numerous Grade 1s, and she's probably one of the best females that we have had here in the United States in a number of years, and that's Lady Eli. I can't help but look at this filly, Newspaper of Record, and get that same kind of feeling. You just look and see the way that she moves, and the fact that she has that tactical speed, and we've talked about it so frequently. Everyone talks about tactical speed on dirt. Tactical speed on turf, I think, is equally as important, if not more so. Because if you can stay close to the pace and you have that ability to finish, those horses come from the back of the pack. They just are never, ever going to have any chance. And we've seen that over the past handful of years. You've seen that with a horse like Wise Dan with that tactical speed. You've seen a horse like Tepin with that tactical speed where they can get close and then just dust the field. I think Newspaper of Record, to be honest with you, I don't have many knocks. I think she's going to be a absolute bear to handle in a race like this. The other thing to keep in mind, just taking a look again at some of the odds overseas, a couple of the different bookies, they're offering 3-1, 5-2. I have a feeling she's probably going to be pretty darn close to that on Breeders' Cup Friday. Maybe slightly less, but at the end of the day, to be honest with you, again, we've got to wait and see what these fields ultimately come together and what they really, truly look like. But boy, I think she's going to be to me, she's the most likely winner of Breeders' Cup weekend. Newspaper of Record in the Juvenile Fillies turf. I don't have a heck of a lot negative to say about her, and I've got a ton of positive things, if you couldn't already tell. It looks like Chad has another good one on the turf. Let's move over to the Juvenile Fillies on dirt, because there's a horse called Bellafina who really hasn't done a heck of a lot wrong throughout her career. Admittedly, I was a little bit unsure of what to expect from her exiting a race like the Del Mar Debutante because it came back so painfully slow, and visually it just looked very, not impressive whatsoever. Well, all she does is come back in her first start going 2 turns for Simon Callahan in the Chandelier, and she puts the boots to the field. Michael Rona with the stretch run of the Chandelier.
For home, Bellafina out by 2 at the top of the lane. Vibrance is second. Brill making no impression, back a distant third. In 4th position is Delou, but past the 8th pole comes Bellafina, bounding 5 clear from Vibrance and Brill. It's 4 lanterns versus 1 dazzling, sparkling Chandelier. Bellafina is Bellissima. Wins by 6 lengths from Vibrance. 4 lengths to Brill third, followed in by Delou and Delmar May.
Now, Bellafina, if you believe that effort right there, realistically, there aren't, from a speed figure standpoint and from a talent standpoint, there aren't many other fillies at this point anyway that look like they stack up with her, maybe with the exception of Serengeti Empress. But outside of those two, that's when you've got to start kind of making, I don't want to say making crazier cases and thinking way outside the box, but truth be told, strictly from a speed figure standpoint and the way that they have looked on the racetrack, it feels like Bellafina and Serengeti Empress are here, and then you've got the Restless Riders, the Sipican Harbors, the Jaywalks, those types. Bellafina currently at a number of books being offered anywhere between 2-1 and 5-2, somewhere in that sort of ballpark. When you compare that to Serengeti Empress in the 3s, 3.5s, 4s range, again, it's one of those instances very similar to what we just talked about, or what I talked about with Newspaper of Record. Sometimes, and I'm one of the main people that I'll go through and take a look, and if there is any sort of question for me with one of the shorter prices, I'm going to I don't care if the horse is 35-1. I want to take a shot against, but I want to have reasoning for it and acknowledging that they are probably still the most likely winner. In a case like Newspaper of Record in the Juvenile Fillies turf, in a case like Bellafina or Serengeti Empress in a race like the Juvenile Fillies, I don't have a lot of interest in trying to beat them because based on that effort, if you believe the Chandelier effort from Bellafina and you believe that stakes effort from Serengeti Empress at Churchill Downs, I believe it was the Pocahontas, I like Restless Rider. Big fan of hers. Sipican Harbor, she's looked good as well. Jaywalk looks like she could be very, very talented. I just don't think any of them have done anything as impressive visually as what the top two have. So am I in a rush to try to fade either one of those two? No. But Bellafina, to me, if you believe that Chandelier, boy, she's rock solid in a spot like this. Now, if you're looking for a little bit of a knock, or a little bit of, I don't want to say a knock, but trying to just take a shot against, she is going to have to ship out of California and ship into Kentucky, something that Serengeti Empress is not going to have to do. Serengeti Empress is at home. It's a home game for her. You're going to have Bellafina going on the road. I do think the competition level that Bellafina has been facing as opposed to Serengeti Empress is significantly better. I think she's beating better horses than Serengeti Empress is. That doesn't mean that Serengeti Empress will be incapable of handling a class hike or beating better horses. But at the same time, I think you can't help but look at a horse like Bellafina and say, if she comes back with that effort that she delivered in the Chandelier, she's going to be very difficult to be in there. Again, she's being offered anywhere in that 5-2, 2-1 range for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, as opposed to a Serengeti Empress who's in that 3.5-4 range, and then Restless Rider and Sippic and Harbor there in the sort of high single-digit numbers. So, to me, Bellafina, another one. I had major questions going into the Chandelier, and they were specifically because, boy, that Del Mar race just looked so god-awful. Well, guess what? She came back. She answered the questions that I had anyway. She put those questions to bed. Now the only sort of real question for me at this point, it's not so much about ability. It's not about the connections. We know Simon Callahan knows a thing or two about training good horses. It's just more a matter of how does she handle the ship in to Kentucky. And again, it's a road game for her. Home game for Serengeti Empress. Road game for Bellafina. But Bellafina, I think, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not going to try to fade a horse that I think is probably just one of the best of her division at this point. We'll find out. Maybe some things will change. But Bellafina, she looks pretty darn good at this point. The boys' version, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, another division that there's going to be a heavy favorite. This one, trained by Bob Baffert. His name, Game Winner. Game Winner is a perfect 3 for 3. 3 lifetime starts. He's a dual Grade 1 winner. Won a Grade 1 going shorter, 7/8 of a mile at Del Mar. Most recently, a Grade 1 winner going 2 turns out at Santa Anita at the Great Race Place. He wins the Grade 1 American Pharoah. Here is the stretch run of the American Pharoah.
A little better. Rowayton hard ridden at the top of the stretch by Giroux. It's Game Winner on the outside, heading Rowayton with 3/16 of a mile to go. Gunmetal Grey couldn't go with them. Is now 4 lengths away. It's Game Winner coming past the 8th pole, extending his advantage to more than a length over Rowayton. Gunmetal Grey is next. Game Winner. He's a habitual winner. He's the undefeated winner of the American Pharoah. Wins by 5 lengths to Gunmetal Grey, who grabbed second from Rowayton.
Now again, this is a horse I really don't have a heck of a lot to knock about him. He's done nothing wrong in those 3 lifetime starts. He's run fast. That's the other very impressive thing to me thus far. Debut earning 83. The sort of the patented move for Baffert when he knows that there's a good one. Second start after a victory, blinkers off. Boom, he comes forward. He moves up to a 93 winning that Del Mar Futurity. Then they go out to 2 turns with him. And what does he do? Puts the boots to the field, earns a 97 buyer. This horse continues to improve. He's got a very nice pedigree. You see he's by Candy Ride. He's out of an APND mare. There's some big names down on the BAM side of the entire pedigree. He's going to be a very logical and likely win contender. Baffert knows a thing or two about shipping to Churchill Downs and winning Grade 1s. There's really not a lot to knock about this horse. Admittedly, I didn't love going into the American Pharoah. When I had watched tape of one of his prior workouts, he got a little bit goofy. Pop back to his left lead at the wire. If you don't like the lead change stuff, fast forward. It's the beauty of a podcast. You don't have to listen to it. So I didn't love that. But when he came back and looked like the way that he did, again, another horse I don't really have any knocks about. If you want to have any sort of concern with a horse like this, or if you want to try to beat him, I think you're doing it based on the value aspect of it. And again, that's what this game is all about, value. If you don't necessarily believe he warrants the short price that he's likely to be, and if we take a look right now over at some European bookmakers, you're looking at 3-2, 7-4, 11-8, 5-4 in some spots. You're very likely looking at a horse that's going to be damn close to even money for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Now, there are other alternatives. There are interesting 2-year-olds out there. Whether you want to give a Mind Control an opportunity, and yes, it's not ideal that he missed the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland a couple weeks back, but you know that he's very talented. He's a good horse, no question about it. You want to give Complexity for Chad a little bit of a look. You can get a decent number on him, probably as the second choice. You want to give Shug a look. Code of Honor. Cairo Cat. You've got some nice horses in there that they're not totally impossible. They're not. It's not like you're dealing with a precipitous drop-off from a speed figure standpoint from Game Winner to everyone else. But the thing that Game Winner has for him, he is seasoned already. He's run 3 times. He's run at different tracks on different distances and things of that nature. He's got Bob Baffert in his corner. And you just know that he doesn't need to bring, he is not dependent on being in one spot. Now, we'll find out again. The ship into Kentucky is different than shipping from San Diego to Arcadia. But with Baffert, Churchill Downs, I don't think you really have a lot to be concerned about. If you don't like the price, I respect that. And you want to look elsewhere. But I don't think there's a heck of a lot to knock about the horse himself thus far. He's done nothing wrong, and he deserves to be the favorite in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Be very, very interested to see. Not necessarily, obviously I'll be interested to see who the alternatives are come prices and things like that. But I'm going to be interested to see how short a price he is. Does he go off at even money? I can't imagine him going off less than that. 3 to 5, 4 to 5. I just can't. But even money, and at that point, if you love the horse, do you look at even money and say, that's value? Maybe not from an individual race standpoint where you're looking to bet him at evens, but perhaps he's the key in a pick 4 or a pick 5 or whatever wagers are going to be available on Friday. Game Winner, a very likely winner and a very likely favorite. He may be, I'm trying to think if this is a crazy thing to say. Will he be the shortest priced favorite of the weekend? Off the top of my head, thinking through, looking at this little list I've put together, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that Game Winner will be the shortest price favorite. I don't think he's the most likely winner. Again, I think that's newspaper of record of the weekend, but I would say that Game Winner is probably the shortest priced favorite of the entire Breeders' Cup weekend. We'll find out. I think he's going to flirt with that even money territory. We move on to Saturday now, and we're going to take a look at 4 races in particular from Saturday with 4 favorites that are likely to be favorites, and I think now, it felt like with those 2-year-olds, all 3 of them, they were pretty stout. Really not a lot to knock about any of them. I think you can poke some holes basically in each one of these 4 horses that I'm about to lay out there for you. We're going to kick things off with the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and a horse that I have been very, very high on from day one. He continues to plug along. He's a perfect 4 for 4, and he has been very impressive basically in all 4 of his victories. Is Catalina Cruiser for John Sadler. Catalina Cruiser, he's lightly raced, and boy, has he just sort of exploded onto the scene. Now, the concern here is he's been gone for a little while. But when we last saw him in the Pat O'Brien, he put on a show. Here's the stretch run.
Way is still in the contest. They're at the top of the lane now. Catalina Cruiser still just being pushed along by Drayden Van Dyke. Battle of Midway, trying hard to make a race of it, but Catalina Cruiser, really just a workout for him today, striding away, magnificent looking individual too. Catalina Cruiser and Drayden Van Dyke absolutely cruise in the Pat O'Brien. Battle of Midway second.
So Catalina Cruiser is the kind of horse that if you just look at him from strictly a figure standpoint, he's run 4 times, 3 times he's earned triple-digit Beyer speed figures, 107, 107, 103 most recently. He's won 2 turns. He has won at 1 turn. He's won at Santa Anita. He's won at Del Mar. He's beaten not great company, but solid company. And I think that's ultimately what it boils down to with a horse like this. When they're so lightly raced, I think you need to make sort of a call on your own as a handicapper. Are they going to be able to handle beating or running against better horses? It's one thing to be lightly raced and earn these giant gaudy figures X, Y, and Z. But if you're doing it against lesser horses, it's a hell of a lot easier to do. Can you do that against better horses? And in a race like the Dirt Mile, you could possibly have a City of Light. You could possibly have a Promises Fulfilled. You could possibly have, who knows, a Mind Your Biscuits. I think he'll end up in the Classic. But what I'm saying is he's going to be facing the best horses of his career by far. And he's going to be doing it off of a pretty significant layoff. We haven't seen him since the end of August. And sort of, you know what, you got to call a spade a spade. John Sadler's record outside of California is not good. Now, I don't think he is incapable of winning races outside of California. I don't think that at all. We saw he almost won the Breeders' Cup Distaff with Stellar Wind a few years ago now. Earlier this year, Accelerate. He almost got the job done down at Oaklawn. He got beat by City of Light, who at the time was just raging. Catalina Cruiser, I think from a raw talent standpoint, in my opinion, is as talented as any of these horses that will be running on Saturday, including the Breeders' Cup Classic horses. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be able to handle a test like this, because we have seen unbelievably talented horses that when they get into a battle, they don't want to do it. They pack it in. Now, we've seen on the flip side of things, we've seen horses that probably aren't as naturally talented as some others, but they have that will to win. They want to go and beat you. They want to get into a fight. Catalina Cruiser, the jury is out. We don't know. And who knows? Maybe his talent is just so far superior that we still won't find out. I have a sneaky feeling this is going to be the opportunity or the chance. If you don't like him, or if you think that, you know what, maybe he's just a little bit dressed up, maybe he's not as good as the numbers in the paper would suggest, this is going to be your opportunity because he's going to get bet in here. If we take a look and see what some of the prices are overseas at this point for the dirt mile, I'd imagine he's going to be pretty darn short. You've got a lot of 7 to 4s, 11 to 8s, a couple of 2 to 1s, 13 to 8s. He's going to get bet in this spot. And that action is also including the likes of Mind Your Biscuits in there. You take Biscuits out of there, Catalina Cruiser's going to be right flirting with that sort of 6 to 5 range, I would imagine. If you don't like him or you don't think that he's going to be able to handle that sort of bump against better horses, this is your opportunity. If you think that he is just so far superior from a talent standpoint that it won't matter, again, maybe you have an opportunity to try to go against the grain, and maybe he is sort of the kind of horse that you want to just single and put most of your eggs in that basket. I think the talent is there. I'd be lying to you if I said I had a very good idea of whether or not he would be able to handle a dogfight. We'll find out, though, in 2 weeks, because it feels like this field, regardless of a Mind Your Biscuits, I think it's going to be a pretty darn good field. He's going to need to prove that he can ship out of town. He's going to need to buck the trend with the John Sadler Breeders' Cup runners. He's going to need to do it against better horses. Catalina Cruiser, no question the talent is there. We'll find out if the guts are there Breeders' Cup Saturday. As far as the Breeders' Cup Sprint is concerned, Imperial Hint, a fan favorite. Everyone loves him. The story is great. Bit of a bargain kind of a horse as far as the purchase price is concerned. Low-profile connections. And he's a little horse, not a big guy. And all he does is go out there and just put the boots to horses, put the boots to fields. His 2 most recent races, both of them in grade 1s, one at Saratoga, one at Belmont Park. He has not been out of first gear. He has not been asked to run a step, and he has gone in decimated fields. 2 back in the Vanderbilt, I would argue one of the most impressive sprint races in a grade 1 that you're going to ever see. And I understand maybe some of the horses in that field were not spectacular, but it's still Saratoga, and it's still a grade 1. And he went on and won by 3 3/4 lengths, never asked to run a step, sat off of horses, showing new dimensions. It was a giant effort. He earned a 108 Beyer speed figure. We're going to look at his most recent start at Belmont. This was his prep leading into the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Here is the stretch run of the grade 1 Vosburg.
Side and is now taken second after a half mile in 44.37 seconds. They're into the stretch. And Imperial Hint's under a hand ride here. Javier Castellano takes a peek back. There's no one coming. Mr. Crow is second. Silver Ride is third on the outside. It's just so easy. So easy for this little rocket ship. Imperial Hint geared down in the Vosburg.
Now, if you're looking for positives, what else do you need to see? I mean, the horse looks fantastic out on the racetrack. He just cruises. Javier hasn't had to get into this horse basically since going back to that run 3 starts back at Churchill Downs. Been a fantastic, 3 starts back in the True North, 4 starts back when he ended up getting defeated down at Churchill. We'll talk about that again in a second. Visually, this horse checks all the boxes. He has tactical speed. He can win from on it. He can win from just off of it. Visually, he looks tremendous. My concern, I think a lot of people are going to look at it and say, well, wet track, he got beat in that Churchill Downs Stakes, and it was at Churchill Downs, which happens to be where the Breeders' Cup Sprint is. I'm going to go kind of against those sort of more common thoughts. I don't believe the wet track is what got him beat. He was the perfect 3 for 3 going into that race on a wet racing surface. So he's 3 for 4. Wet track, don't buy that. That's not a problem for him. This horse can handle a wet racing surface. Some people will say Churchill Downs. Now, perhaps there's something to do there, and then that's not ideal for him. And guess what? That's not ideal for anyone that wants to back this horse at Churchill. I'm not totally convinced that that's the case either, though. 7/8 of a mile, probably a little bit farther than ideal for him. I think he is best at flat 3/4, but I don't think he's incapable at 7/8. To me, the real sort of concern with that Churchill Downs effort was how he got there, because his race prior, his prep, was down at Tampa Bay Downs, and it was in a Florida bred or a restricted sort of race, and he just cruised. Basically what you just saw in the Vosburg, that's what he did in that Tampa Bay Downs race. My thought is he didn't get enough fitness out of that race leading into the race at Churchill Downs, where he had to run hard, he ran into good horses, and he felt the effects of it late. I'm fearful that that may be a very similar scenario to what we see here. You saw how visually impressive he was in the Vosburg, but he only really ran 5/8 of a mile. And I say he really ran. I mean, he did. Obviously, you can see how fast the fractions were, and he just, he was blitzing everybody out there. But Javier never really got into him. And my only concern is, did you get enough fitness exiting a race like that for a race like the Breeders' Cup Sprint when you saw what Roy H. did out on the West Coast? Looks like the old Roy H. You know Whitmore is going to come with a big effort. You know Promises Fulfilled if he shows up in this race. Damn fast. Really talented sprinter. You know Limousine Liberal. He's the kind of horse, by the way, that might be slipping through the cracks a little bit. Limousine Liberal loves Churchill Downs, and he's capable at 6 furlongs. Throwing that out there. This Imperial Hint, though, I've always been a fan of this horse. I think he's very, very talented. I think he's versatile. He can adapt to different things thrown at him. I don't think Churchill's a problem. I don't think a wet racing surface is a problem. It's nagging at me. I thought that maybe he was a little bit... Did he need more fitness leading into that race at Churchill Downs back in May? Is he going to need a little bit more? Did he get enough out of that Vosburg leading into a race like the Breeders' Cup Sprint? I would imagine they'll drill him pretty quick leading up to it, but we'll find out. If you get that version, though, and he is fit and ready to go, could be a handful. He's a very, very talented horse. From a price standpoint in a race like the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and again, it may not be a giant field, but I do think there's plenty of quality in here. You have plenty of 2-to-1s out there, over in Europe anyway. 2-to-1s, occasionally a 5-to-2. But if you think Promises Fulfilled goes in there, there's going to be other speed. Roy H. has more versatility as well, if you think he's going back in the right direction. I've also seen XY Jet's name pop up. XY Jet is a really, really fast horse. We'll find out. It's going to be an interesting race. May not be a giant field. I would imagine you'll probably be looking in that 8 to 10 range. But you're going to have quality. An Imperial Hint, he's going to be a short price. I love him. I think visually he's very, very good. Did he get the fitness he needed exiting that Vosburg heading into the Breeders' Cup Sprint? Last two favorites we'll take a look at. Likely favorites anyway, and I'd be stunned if one of them isn't, and I would be pretty surprised if the other isn't a favorite. In these final two races, they happen to be the two big ones. Let's first start off with the Breeders' Cup Turf. This was a long-hoped entrant in the turf, but first things first, she needed to take care of business. She did so about 2 weeks ago, obviously talking about Enable, the super filly trained by John Gosden. She was the winner of the 2017 Arc de Triomphe. She had only started once in 2018. She came back on about 4 weeks rest, went out and did this. This is the stretch run of the 2018 Arc.
Frankie Dettori and Enable are poised. The lady in waiting as they head towards the 2 furlong and 400 metre mark. Enable and Capri are the first two. Then Salu and Tiberian. Sea of Class is making ground through the field. Enable is asked to go and seal the arc. Sea of Class has weaved all the way through with Cloth of Stars to chase, but it's Enable 2 legs clear. Wild Guy, Sea of Class, and also Cloth of Stars are closing down. Enable, Sea of Class is still coming. Enable and Sea of Class.
Enable's 9 of 10 lifetime. In her only defeat, she finished third, and it was her first start as a 3-year-old off of a pretty considerable layoff, a November to April layoff. Other than that, all she's done is just gone out there and blitzed everyone. She's been fantastic. I think you can look at her a couple different ways. You can look at her and say she is just simply far superior to any other horse that's going to be in the race. And I wouldn't really argue with anyone that made that case. The sort of other side of the coin is the elephant in the room that everyone has discussed. There's never been an Arc de Triomphe winner who in the same year has gone on to win the Breeders' Cup Turf. Now, I think the reason that could possibly be a little bit different this year is because you have not had long sort of sustained campaign from Enable here in 2018. She's run twice. You saw her getting a little bit short at the end of the arc. I wonder if that's going to be one of those instances. I remember going back to the 2015 Kentucky Derby leading into the Preakness. I was speaking to a few people. I was doing a Triple Crown situation and all that stuff with ESPN. And a few people had said that they felt for American Pharoah, because remember, prior to him starting his campaign as a 3-year-old, he had a little bit of a foot problem. And there were a number of people that thought that the Kentucky Derby, him winning that race, he had to work as hard as he did because that was the race that actually got him fit. The Arkansas Derby was just basically a walkover. The race prior, which I believe is the Rebel, was basically a walkover. He needed a hard race in the Kentucky Derby to get him fit and tight and ready to go. And then we saw him absolutely destroy a field in the Preakness, and we saw him destroy a field in the Belmont Stakes and win the Triple Crown. I do wonder if there's a scenario where this sort of scenario is playing out for Enable, where that all-weather race, where she came back off of the long layoff, it was really nothing more than a means to an end to get to the Arc. And you saw in that Arc de Triomphe, she ran very, very well. She had a perfect trip, no question about it. And when Frankie asked her to go, she went. But you saw her getting a little bit short at the end. And I do wonder, is that the race that she needed, that really hard one, to get her to peak here in Kentucky in just a couple of weeks? We'll find out. From a price standpoint, though, I, again, can understand anyone that looks at this and says, overseas. Now, again, this is a little bit of home cooking. The Europeans do love theirs when they come over here. Rightfully so, for the most part. You're looking at basically 1 to 2. Now, I wouldn't take 1 to 2 on Enable, really, I think, in any scenario, just because I think 1 to 2 in a Breeders' Cup race is just a crazy price. She is far and away the most likely winner of that race. There's really no question about it. But I think there is a case to be made that there are more fascinating and more interesting alternatives to her, especially considering this is not an easy feat that she's trying to accomplish. She is the most likely winner of that race. Again, no question about it. But this is where, again, the value comes into it. Some people are going to just say she is the best horse. We're going to single her in multi-race wagers. We're going to go move on from there. I don't know that I would single her. I think there's going to be a scenario where you can find some pretty solid value and some nice alternatives outside of her. But what she did there in the Arc, she's a special filly. There's no question about it. What she's accomplished in her career, she's right up there with one of the better fillies and probably even just horses over the past 5-10 years. What she's been able to do, she's beat boys. She's done it in a few different countries. And if she comes over here and is able to be the first to win the Arc and the Breeders' Cup Turf in the same year, that will put her in sort of more or less rarefied air, because she'll be the only one to have ever accomplished that. Enable, very talented horse. And guess what? She's the star power that it's kind of felt like this Breeders' Cup has lacked a little bit. Her coming here now, we've got a bona fide superstar. No disrespect to the classic horses or any of the other horses that I've mentioned earlier, but Enable is the superstar of the superstars. We needed one. We got her. Hopefully she comes over here and gives a good account of herself. And that leads us into the Classic, the last division. Accelerate. What else is there to say? He's been a monster this year. He's done something that I don't know how many other horses have ever done. Winning the Santa Anita Handicap, the Gold Cup, which at one point was at Hollywood Park, but now is obviously at Santa Anita. And then he came back and won the Pacific Classic, all of those races at 1.25 miles. Now, the sort of challenge for him is to go on and win the Breeders' Cup Classic at 10 furlongs, but he has to do it outside of California. We're going to go back to his most recent race. This was his prep leading into the Breeders' Cup and the Awesome. Again, he ran into West Coast. He ran into some decent horses. Might not have been as easy or as smooth as some of us, myself included, would have liked to have seen. But he got the job done, and that is something that you have to consider and you have to give him credit for. Here's the stretch run of the Awesome again.
The whip tries to hang tough along the rail. They're clear of the Lieutenant. Prime Attraction. 3/16 left to go. It's Accelerate with West Coast dogged on the inside. Isotherm between them running a bold race. West Coast and Accelerate. A riveting renewal of the Awesome again. Accelerate on the outside with his head in front close to home. West Coast running out of puff has given a good account of himself, but Accelerate keeps powering on. Accelerate 2.5 lengths coming away to beat West Coast and Isotherm.
Now, with Accelerate, I would have liked to have seen, that was not an easy prep. Now, I don't think you want a prep as easy as Imperial Hints, but at the same time, I don't think you want the horse to have to just really dig down and find it. And And there were other pieces to that puzzle that I just didn't love. I happened to be there that day, right there on the rail in the winner's circle. He was very reluctant to load, which is something that's not normally him. Threw a little bit of a fit in the gate. Again, not normally him. He's very professional. And then running as hard as he had to win that race. Again, now is this an instance, sort of the flip side of Imperial Hint? I asked, did Imperial Hint get enough coming out of the Vosburg into the sprint? Did a race like the Awesome again, is that going to be a little too taxing going into a race like the Classic? Coupling that with John Sadler's record in the Breeders' Cup outside of Southern California? We'll find out. What he has done this year, he deserves to be the favorite. I think that's pretty cut and dry. He's done certain things. He's put together a campaign that, you know what? There have been a number of fantastic years in recent memory from big-name horses. Accelerate's 2018. This is right up there with one of the best campaigns thus far. Now, look, if he can put the cherry on top of the sundae with the Classic, then you're talking about this is very clearly one of the best runs that we've had here in quite some time. If you can't do it, it's still a very, very strong campaign. But if you can't do it, then all of a sudden I think it does open some doors for other horses as far as year-end honors are concerned. Whether I agree with that or not, that remains to be seen. That's TBD. There's still plenty of time. We'll get into Eclipse Awards. We got a long way to go. First things first, let's get through the Breeders' Cup. As far as prices are concerned, a lot of 3-1, 7-2s, a couple of 5-2s. To me, he feels like he's going to be right in that 3-1 range. And then after him, take your pick. Do you want West Coast? Do you want McKinsey? And I think that's the thing with a horse like Accelerate. Based on what he has done, I think the case could be made that if you get 3-1 on him, pretty good. That's not a terrible price on a horse like that. Again, if you're looking at it strictly black and white, saying on paper what he's accomplished at these distances, his tactical ability, you know what? 3-1's not a bad price. Then you start factoring in those other, extenuating circumstances, the connections outside of California with a relatively difficult final prep leading into this. Then if you want to start questioning 3-1, 7-2, that's entirely up to you, and that's up to you as the gambler and the handicapper to make that decision. There are plenty of positives for Accelerate. There's certainly some questions also for him, though, leading into the Breeders' Cup Classic at Churchill Downs here in 2 weeks' time. This is right there. I mean, look, we're very fortunate in this racing world where every 6 months there's a marquee event. You have the Breeders' Cup, and then 6 months later you have the Kentucky Derby. And in between, you have all sorts of fascinating events. No question about it. The boutique meetings of the summer. You also have, obviously, Keeneland, which is ongoing right now, and all sorts of other big things. But the bread and butter, the Derby, the Breeders' Cup. And here we are, 2 weeks away. We'll find out how these horses fare, as well as some of the other interesting races and other long shots, and things will come together and be a little bit clearer in the next few days. I believe pre-entries are Monday. I could be wrong. You can find that for certain over on drf.com in case I did have a little bit of a hiccup there and not actually say that correctly. But I'm pretty sure it's Monday the pre-entries come out. We're going to take a quick little bump. We're going to load this video. We're going to take a look at the NFL Week 7 trifecta, looking to build on a 13-5 start. Let's button this preview edition up with the NFL Week 7 trifecta here on the Matt Bernier Show. 13-5-0 to start the season, 72%. This is far and away the best I've started in the 3 years that I've been doing this. So pretty pleased with that, but obviously things can go south in a hurry. You have an 0-3 week, all of a sudden the number doesn't look nearly as good as it does. But been very fortunate recently. We've had a good little run here, continue to build on that, and really I kind of look at it like baseball. Most baseball series are 3-game series. I kind of feel like week in and week out, if you go 2 out of 3, if you win the series, you're going to come out in pretty damn good shape. And that's kind of the way that I'm approaching this. So if we can continue to churn out these 2 for 3s, 2 for 3s, 2 for 3s, at the end of the year, all of us will be quite pleased. 3 games this week. We're going to take a look at the Detroit Lions at the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are catching 3 points. I don't think the Dolphins are particularly good, and I don't entirely know. I've read some things that Tannehill may be back for this week, or he may not be. And look, Brock Osweiler is certainly not a fascinating alternative, but look, he did get the job done against arguably one of the top 3 or 4 defenses in the league last week against Chicago. Detroit is a bit of... I'm trying to think of a good comparison for Detroit from like a racing standpoint. Detroit is the horse that, you know, can look so good, but there is just that one flaw, that one fatal flaw that prevents them from being upper echelon. I'm trying to think. I mean, is it unfair? And I don't mean this as a slight to the connections. Is it unfair to compare them to like a Kobe's back when he was at his best? Where from a talent standpoint, he was every bit as good as any of those other sprinters. The problem is he couldn't get out of the gate. And he always left himself way too much to do. And again, that precluded him from being one of the top 2 or 3 sprinters when he was at his best. With the Lions, look, Matt Stafford can throw for 400 yards basically every week, but for one reason or another, it just feels like they can't get over the hump and really put themselves in position to be one of those. Heck, they might not even be one of the top 2 teams in their own division. So Detroit, they're fine. I understand they probably are the better team overall, but giving me 3 points at home with the Dolphins. And Dolphins have been a little bit of overachievers this year. I don't think they're great, but catching points at home, I'll take that. Give me Miami +3 at home. Minnesota Vikings at the New York Jets. Jets +3.5. Give me the points. I think the Jets are actually a little bit better maybe than I had given them credit for earlier in the year. Still don't know that Darnold is the end-all be-all like some folks in New York are hoping. This, to me, is more about Minnesota. Minnesota, I don't think is quite as good as I thought that they were leading into the season. I thought they were probably the best team in the NFC last year. And if it wasn't for, you know, running into, and I say that, I realize Philadelphia put the boots to them in the NFC title game, but I thought for the most part, Minnesota was probably the most well-rounded team at the time. And, okay, it just didn't work out. And that's sports. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This year, they've just been, the defense has been a little bit shaky, but everyone's defense has been shaky, to be fair. Cousins, I think he's better than what they had. And I know Case Keenum, he's had a rough stretch here this year, but he was good last year. I still think Cousins is an improvement. Their wide receiver core is tremendous with Diggs and Thielen, and I think Kyle Rudolph is probably one of the more underrated tight ends that's still very, very consistent and goes out there and gets numbers. Dalvin Cook, he's still, I think, working the kinks out of that little hamstring problem that he's had. But the good news is it looks like Latavius Murray at least woke up last week and realized he's still playing in the NFL. And, you know, if you want to keep your job, you got to be a little bit more productive. And he popped with a big week. I think he went for over 120 yards. So I think Minnesota is good, but not overwhelmingly good. And I think the Jets are actually better than certainly what I thought they were and what still some people think. And 3.5 at home, boy, that hook is a big piece there. Give me the points for the Jets, +3.5 at home against the Vikings. In the last game of the 3, I feel like I've had this team in the trifecta for this year. Keep in mind, this is only the 7th week of the season. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's been at least 3 or 4 times. Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs -6. Give me, I'll lay the points. The Chiefs, and unfortunately, I didn't get to see the game last week against the Patriots on Sunday night because I was over in Scotland and the times are all out of whack there. This happened to be the one week, obviously, that the Patriots were playing at 8:30 or 8:20 on Sunday night, which over there, I believe, was a 1:20 a.m. kick, which at that point, that's certainly not happening. But nonetheless, the fact that the Chiefs were able to battle back from being down early on in that game in Foxborough. Foxborough, it's not the loudest place. I think most people, if you're familiar with New England or you live in New England or in the Boston area, I don't know what it is, but the acoustics at Gillette, for some reason, it doesn't allow it to be a very loud stadium. It's been well documented, and people talk about it all the time, whether it's on sports radio or on any of the TV shows. But it's still a difficult place to play simply because you're playing the Patriots. The fact that the Chiefs were able to come back and make that game as close as it was, Mahomes on the road, clearly you've got a ton of talent on that team. When you put it this way, when Sammy Watkins is like your 4th or 5th option, you got a pretty good setup going. I'm a believer in the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC. I think the Rams are the best team in the NFC. I think I said that a few weeks ago, and if I didn't say it, I felt it anyway. But that's not breaking any news. They're record-wise, they're 2 of the best teams. The Rams still unbeaten, and the Chiefs only have 1 loss to date. I think they are better than the Patriots at this point. Doesn't mean I don't think the Patriots will eventually, and I know they just beat them, but I think right now I still think from a talent standpoint, because this league, it feels like if you just outscore everyone, it doesn't matter about defense. If you can outscore the other team, simply put, you're just going to get the job done with the way that the rules are set up. So to me, the Chiefs And the fact that it is less than a touchdown, it's only 6 points. Technically it's a touchdown, but sans the extra point. I just love that. I think that's a very good opportunity, and I don't get the love for the Bengals. I know a lot of people are big fans of theirs, but I guess now that Mixon is back and his knee looks like it's a little bit better, but I just don't. It's still Andy Dalton. I know Andy Dalton. Sunday night in Kansas City, I'll take the Chiefs -6. So a quick recap, 13-5-0 year-to-date, hoping to build on that. Lions at Dolphins, give me the Dolphins +3. Vikings at Jets, give me the Jets +3.5. Bengals at Chiefs, give me the Chiefs -6. All the home teams for me this week for the NFL Week 7 trifecta. On the preview edition of the Matt Bernier Show, if you've been listening live on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle, at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. Thank you for doing so. If you listen podcasts like most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. Again, YouTube, click the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. iTunes, write us a review, give us a positive rating. If you haven't listened to the DRF Players podcast, you certainly want to do that with Kinchin and Fornental. I believe now they have the DRF Sports Form podcast that those boys are involved with. Go give that a listen as well. This is going to roll in if you're listening live. This is going to roll right into the latest edition of Out of the Gate. This week, just Beer and I, but we're going to have the other normal contributors. David Aragona will be involved, I believe. Jonathan Kinchin, I believe, is involved as well. Perhaps Nicole Russo. I have to take a look at the rundown. I have to build it. I have to put it together now. So all sorts of good things going on there. You want to follow me on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. Questions, comments, concerns, you name it. For those folks that have sent in horses, I just, based on the way that this time has kind of put itself together with me traveling and whatnot, it's gotten lost in the shuffle, but I don't want to just gloss over those. So realistically, next week is probably not going to be the week that I'll touch on those, because that is the week leading into the Breeders' Cup. And then the week of Breeders' Cup, I think the plan is still to have, as we have for the past couple of years, the joint DRF Players podcast and Matt Bernier Show. We'll go over the Breeders' Cup races, me, Pete, and Jonathan. And I'm thinking when I get back from Breeders' Cup, when we kind of settle back in from that, we'll start going over those horses. So again, I apologize to those of you that have sent them in. If you could just hang tight and then possibly help me out and resend them to me at Bernier_Matt, or beneath the YouTube player, or beneath the video player on the YouTube channel, that would be greatly beneficial, because then I can go through and do an actual, I don't want to just kind of give it a half-assed effort. I don't want to kind of just say, oh, yeah, nice horse, blah, blah, blah. I want to at least do a little bit of homework if you guys are going to take the time to ask questions about it. So fire those back to me in a little bit of due time. I apologize that it's been so long. Thank you all for listening, however you take this thing in, for this upcoming weekend. However you're playing, whatever you're playing, wherever you're playing. Good luck. I'll be back with the recap edition on Tuesday afternoon. This has been the Matt Bernier Show.